I can hear intense, like angry whining. That is what she told me that.
Yeah, that's what she said. No, I can't hear a thing, but I'll tell you if there's any audio interference. Can I drink my coffee while we're doing this, or is that going to cause?
Yeah, only if you audibly slurp it.
Okay, yeah.
It's Japanese style.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Powerful slurp.
Hello, Mark.
Yeah, g'day, James. Well, here we are, and this is. I'm designating this as a special Christmas episode, Christmas special, Metacritique. But I'm going to stop there because I'm concerned about my dog, who's already escaped from our yard once this morning, and I want to ascertain where he is before I go any further. So please,
good idea.
Bear with me.
Good idea. Captured.
So I mean, I assume there's a gap of about 5 minutes there where I've been off wrangling the dog. So he was, what I found him is he was fixedly staring at the gate, which has just been secured with a chain, which he previously escaped out of. So he was just out there eyeing it up. Yeah, he's been escaping. Look, I'm burying the lead here.
The context here is that he's no longer where he used to be. That is the dog, and also you.
Not merely in a Heraclitean sense.
That's right.
Okay, so I have big news, which is that I moved to Canberra with my family, and this is one reason. I mean, I really feel like we owe our 5 listeners an explanation about what's been going on. Particularly, like the one possible listener that I know in Sydney, who I won't have seen for ages, who may find out from this, and by extension, other people at the dog park might find out that I've just disappeared off the face of the earth. No one's seen me for about a month. Because a month ago, and this is really unrelated, but this is the other thing that's been going on with me, and clearly hasn't prevented me from podcasting, but nonetheless, I broke the big toe on my left foot just like basically a month ago, which has like been really debilitating in a kind of unexpected way, and it still is.
How did you break it, Mark?
Well, we received a delivery from IKEA at 8:00 on like a Saturday morning, and like I don't know, like I was barely awake, and like, you know, it was hard, like trying to get everything inside the house really quickly, and these bed slats. My daughter, you know, is just old enough. She's moving to her first bed, and I just built this yesterday actually after having had it for a month. So yeah, we got this bed for her, and the bed slats came as like an independent item, and they were just resting against the wall, and I was trying to move a box, and the bed slats fell, and like literally the tip of the slat like slammed into the tip of my big toe. With all the leverage that it had at its disposal, and cracked it. So yeah, like it just like it's still, I still basically can't bear weight on that toe, which obviously is like kind of a problem for like walking and so on. So I'm basically
excruciating stuff.
Yeah, it was pretty unpleasant. But like, you know, it's not that the pain is not really the issue. The issue is just like how irritating it is to not be able to get about, and that's been the case. And I've moved house and moved states. I mean,
in reaction to breaking your toe, was
yeah, I was appalled. I was like,
yeah, A led to B.
Fuck this. Yeah, that's right, Xena.
Sorry about that. That's my dog.
Yeah, it clearly is your dog, James's dog, Xena. It's making herself hurt.
She's doing German Shepherd business.
Yeah, right. It's guarding. Yeah, so like, but we decided complete. I mean, there is a relationship, but it's too deep in the law to go into. But you know, we decided to move to Canberra, just like right after that, and we had to move house with my wife is like 7 months pregnant, and which is obviously in itself quite debilitating. I had a broken toe, and we decided to move house like with like a couple of weeks' notice. Like there was no planning; it was just completely sudden out of nowhere. And I probably won't go into the reasons why we made this decision. Well, maybe I will, because part of it, the really obvious element of it, which I guess I have to be slightly careful talking about, is that there is like a fairly well publicized threat of me losing my job. And like, you know, I'm contractually obligated not to say anything that might reflect negatively on the organization that I work for. But nevertheless, there's a prospect that I might lose my job. And this is one reason we ended up deciding to move very, very quickly, because basically the living situation we had in Sydney was strongly dependent on my income, and should that go away, we didn't have a lot of wiggle room. So
Is there any resolution to the job scenario yet?
No, they kicked the can down the road to the new year. They clearly decided they couldn't deal with it before Christmas, so that's kind of annoying. But whatever, basically.
But I must say, I mean, and despite the circumstances, the move to Canberra in the manner that you did was like classic MGEK. It was just, I broke my toe, radio silence. We live in Canberra now. That was from an outsider's perspective. That was really how it went.
Really, that was even from your perspective. That's how it went.
Yeah.
You
even though you gave me pretty regular updates, but it was absolutely bonkers. I mean, in the best possible way.
It's funny because like you probably are you probably would get the most regular updates of literally anyone. So like if that's how it seemed to you, like
imagine the people from the dog park. They must assume you're dead, or you worked for the CIA.
There's 2 or 3 people at the dog park who like have my contact details. So like one of them eventually like messaged me and was like, I haven't seen you in like weeks, and I told them what had happened. But it's weird because the dog park it's my social scene.
Yep.
The life I had in Sydney had become completely dog based and also infant based. So like I think the infant thing is more familiar to people. Like when you have a child, like your world becomes oriented around the child. Your friends are your child's friends. But I also had a dog, and my friends with my dog's friend. My dog. If my dog got on with another dog, I would develop a relationship with the dog's owners, and it was dependent.
Oh, totally.
Right. So like, Labradors, English bulldogs, things like that. As I have a staffy, those, and of course other staffy owners, I'd have a relationship with them, but other people not so much.
Yeah, when in the early days of Xena, we would just hone in on any Hungarian Vizsla owner because Hungarian Vizslas seem to be the ones that matched with Xena the most because they're psychotic. So that was a good
Vizslas are. I won't take that. Vizslas are blessed dogs, like they are. Amazing.
Oh no, I agree. Absolutely blessed, but they're righteous in they're extremely physical and love to wrestle. So that was
I mean, Graham gets on very well with young Vizslas. So there's quite a lot of dogs like this that in their puppy stage they'll be very good friends for Graham, like 8-year-old Staffordshire Bull Terrier. But when they grow up, I've seen this now. We had a Vizsla called Miles that he was very good friends with as a puppy, but then once it hit 2, it was all over.
Yep. So you're in Canberra.
Yeah.
How do you find first impressions? I've never been. Full disclosure.
Yeah. That's a very Victorian thing to say. Like
Absolutely.
I feel like literally no one from Sydney could possibly get to adulthood without having been obliged to go. Because like in Sydney, I take it, like I'm obviously not Australian, so I don't. But I take it that in Sydney, everyone is obligated to go to Canberra as a child. But in Victoria, everyone has to do like a school trip to Parliament or whatever, right? I think that's
true.
All the kind of cultural institutions here, which is like one of the like it's I'm basically like a massive Canberra fan. Like I really, which is one reason why I obviously agreed to do this because I think Canberra's just fantastic. And one of the things, like it's the bush capital, as some of the certain vintage license plates read, ACT, the bush capital, and it's a big bush town, big country town. Like it's the biggest, it is the biggest inland settlement in Australia, whatever it is, 250,000 people or something. So it's kind of got this country town feel. And you are kind of in the bush, and also the way it's laid out. It's laid out, in accordance with principles of the Garden City movement. So there's like bushland interspersed with all the suburbs. Like you're never really very far. I'm in a back block that backs onto bush, so I'm like looking out of my window. I mean, actually, it's a reserve, but it's a paddock, and then bush beyond. And but it also has like all the Australia's national cultural institutions. So it has the National Library, the National Gallery, the National Parliament. All this stuff and a lot of international stuff because of all the embassies. It has a lot of kind of international facilities at a level that like international schools, that kind of thing, at a level that like nowhere else in Australia has, or at least doesn't have to a superior level. So I think it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And how are you going to deal with the cold come wintertime? This is what I want to know because you are like a famous sook when it comes to the cold.
Yeah, this is interesting. I often reflect on the fact that in Northern English dialects, there are specific words for this. Have I told you this before? So,
no.
Because I'm from the south of England, where we're not that hardy. In the north, they have at least 2 specific, and they're regionals. They're not across the north, but in the northwest of England, there are at least 2 regional words I'm aware of, which specifically mean somebody who can't handle the cold. one
Right.
being Nesh and the other being Mard. So Nesh is the one that comes to mind, Northwestern English term that means someone who can't handle the cold. So I am Nesh. Like I can't. My nose starts running as soon as it dips below 20 degrees. Despite the fact that I grew up in a country in which it's rarely over 20 degrees.
So how are you going to deal with this? Have you thought about this, or is it you're just gonna face it as it comes?
I mean, I reckon I'll be all right.
Classic Nesh response.
Optimism. I don't know if it really is, but like I plan to I don't know, man. Like I'll like because it gets cold in Sydney. Like it doesn't get as cold, but it gets cold enough to like piss me off in Sydney. Like it's still a problem. Like I'll run a heater in the house and I'll rug up. And what do you do? That's life.
It's hard to disagree with you there.
Well, you can either do that or you can move to Townsville. Like those are your options. Which I you know, when I was younger, I strongly wanted to do the latter option. But like,
I was going to say the latter seems pretty okay, but you know,
I'm not into it anymore. I'm not into the heat because I've got really over the heat now. Like I've lived in Australia long enough. When I was here initially, it was just like even for like the first 15 years I lived in Australia, I just couldn't get enough of the heat. Like it doesn't matter how hot it got, I'd be like, this is fantastic.
So you're a man who can't handle the cold and now has had enough of the heat.
Yeah, pretty much. I quite like. Yeah, like, I actually quite like the cold, notwithstanding that I'm basically allergic to it.
Right. Okay. So, what are you going to do when you have to go to work? Assuming you will go to work.
My first response, intuitively, is to ask what your mum's going to do when she has to go to work.
This is going well.
Look, hopefully my employer's not listening to this. The bottom line is my teaching next semester is online. So like, I don't have to go anywhere. But like, I'm just going to commute like after that and see how it goes because I've known academics live significantly further away from their place of employment than I am. Like it's a sub 3-hour drive to the campuses I work on. So I will just see how that is. I mean, that's quite a hefty commute, but you know how academic life works, James. Listeners may not, but like, in the course of an entire year, I may have to attend my workplace, 100 times.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty unlikely to be honest.
That seems like a lot to me.
That's way over that's a worst case scenario. More likely, like 50 is more likely the ballpark I can get it down to. And having to do 50, I mean, admittedly, it's a 6-hour round trip. Having to do that 50 times a year, it's like compared to the commuting that most people do, like pretty reasonable.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But it's also a very nice drive. Sydney to Canberra is a very, very nice drive.
Up the Hume,
because that's the highway that goes. That's the highway that goes to Melbourne, right? So it's mostly on the Hume, like because the Hume doesn't actually go through Canberra. You have to get off the Hume to come to Canberra. Right. The Monero Highway, which runs like within spitting distance of my house. You got to sit on that.
What's it like living on acreage, so to speak?
Well, I'm not on acreage. Like I don't think it's not a huge block we're on actually.
I'm imagining you in this kind of pastoral scene. This is what I'm imagining.
Well, it is because it backs on like it feels very expansive because it backs onto like bush.
And also, you come from Newtown, so which is the opposite.
It's obviously very different. Like living because I've literally come from living in by Sydney standards, the middle of the inner city. Like it's good, man. Like I mean, there's some really obvious. One obvious difference is like I live on a cul-de-sac, which is basically like it's like living on Ramsay Street.
Yeah.
It's just completely bizarre because I may have mentioned this before, but there's a whole bunch of things in Neighbours that I thought were completely fictitious because I grew up watching Neighbours, right? As every English person did.
Yep.
Basically, there are aspects of Neighbours that I thought were completely fictitious, which turned out to be completely real when I arrived in Australia. And one of them is that you have these places where everyone knows each other. Like, I grew up in I grew up in like villages and small towns in England where, I knew my immediate neighbours on either side. And I knew, by which I mean I knew who they were. Like it's not like I had regular social contact with them. It's not. I mean, but like that's it. Like that even in a very small community, that's as much community as existed in like the 80s or 90s in England. But here, I mean, like for Christmas Day, we had like a neighborhood Christmas party where everyone from the street was there.
Yeah, it's off chops.
My dog keeps escaping, and then he keeps being captured by local people who I already know. I've been living here for 10 days. But the dog keeps being returned by different people who live around the neighborhood whom I've met. And then they're like, oh, that I'm not in any way aggravated by the fact that your dog has just come into my house and like jumped all over my children. But on the contrary, I'm going to invite you around to like have drinks with us or something.
I had the same experience. I mean, to a lesser degree, but when I moved, obviously I don't live in the country, but I live kind of on the coast kind of area. I had assumed that there were multiple kind of myths about Australia's outer suburbs that turned out to be 100% correct. They're absolutely exactly as they're depicted. It's extraordinary.
No, it's
and
incredible.
then within a month, I think we moved 2 years ago. Within a month, so it was just near Christmas. Both our neighbours had brought around Christmas gifts, and of course we were caught flat-footed because we hadn't thought to do this. So we had to rush out and buy corresponding gifts. It's outrageous. I mean, it's really nice. It's
bizarre.
But it's also like, I still can't quite get used to it, which I think is me being an asshole.
It's just not, it's not how, it's not reality as I understand it.
No, that's right. Until you realize that maybe it is reality.
That's right. But it's like, I mean, I feel my understandings about my intuitions about what reality are so deeply at odds with this. Like let's get philosophical, but the empirical evidence I'm receiving is not going to penetrate the carapace of ideology by which I relate to the world. So like I imagine that I could live here for 20 years and I will still regard it as a bizarre aberration every time it happens.
Yep. So you've disproven GE more is what you're telling me. Empiricism is finished.
Empiricism is garbage.
Yep. Yeah. No data for Mark.
You're wearing Dungeon Punk's tee.
I am.
Can I see it?
Isn't this the one you got? Oh my god.
There we are. We're wearing exactly the same t-shirt in different colours.
That is grim.
That is
You said it, not me.
Yeah, well, you're implicit. You're implicitly complicit.
Oh my god.
It's okay. I'm going to bleep the expletives. Don't worry.
Yeah, that's good. But you're right though. In terms of, I don't think it would change my opinion either. And insofar as I still think of it as strange that the suburbs work this way. Are these the quiet Australians? I don't know. Is this who we're talking about? I
mean, it makes me laugh immediately because I'm start to think of the flags that my landlord has in his garage, which are pretty on the nose. Are these the quiet Australians?
Imagine how many on the nose flags there must be in garages all over the country.
Well, that's right. That's right, behind closed doors. I mean, it's right. That there's this kind of minor controversy currently, which fulminating, I take it hasn't been dealt with, but about people flying Nazi flags in the suburbs, right? Including the suburb I used to live in, Newtown, in Sydney. There was someone who was caught because because everyone can see into your backyard anyway. You live in Newtown. Someone had a Hakenkreuzbanner in the backyard in some. Trying to remember. I think it was for some reason I believe it was like the Kriegsmarine, the naval ensign of the Nazis, but they had in the backyard. But anyway,
why would you do that? I don't understand.
Because you're a Nazi. It's the most obvious reason. But
I mean, you can be a Nazi without flying the flag. I just don't understand. I don't get it. Like, it seems to be. Why would you? I mean, it just seems like the death drive's in full swing there. Like, why would you cause that much trouble to yourself?
I think being a Nazi is not readily abstractable from the optics of being a Nazi, from the aesthetics. So I think if you're a Nazi, you're gonna go in for something. Like, maybe it doesn't have to be a swastika. It could be what's that called in English? Black Sun, the Sonnenkreuz, the
Sonnedag.
Is that what it is?
Is that what it's called?
But the one,
the one Pete Evans shared.
That's it. It's a tell. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, but like that, you've got to have some like out there fascist, like fascism in general. Like if you, I don't think you can be a fascist in your heart without showing it in some way. Now, maybe you can keep the flags in your garage. Like, maybe you don't have to have them out on the street. But like, I think you've got the symbolization is necessary. But
So it's
maybe,
like being a metalhead.
well, having said this, in my back of my mind while I was saying this, like maybe it's not just true. I mean, I feel like it's kind of peculiarly true of fascism, because fascism as an ideology has a particular relationship to the aesthetic. But
Mm.
I kind of feel like this is probably true of ideology in general. Like, you know, whether it be, I mean, I think communism would be the obvious kind of opposite test case, because I mean, I feel like communism always has this problem that it, in principle, doesn't require it to have all the stuff it does. So, like, you know, communism not only doesn't require, but really shouldn't involve like a cult of personality around a leader, for example. It's completely non-Marxist. In fact, I mean, as I've remarked in print, like the very notion of Marxism is completely paradoxical, because it implies the singular elevation of a particular individual as the source of your ideology, despite the fact that your ideology is supposed to be universal. Like, from a Marxist standpoint, the personage of Marx would seem totally inessential to the development of Marxism, because Marxism surely should just develop logically through historical forces. Yet it's called Marxism.
Mm.
I mean, there are other terms like historical or dialectical materialism, but bottom line is it's called Marxism. And still, like, Marxists still need to keep going back to what Marx said, despite the fact that from a Marxist standpoint, you know, anyone could have said that stuff theoretically. But I don't think that's true. I mean, that's the thing. Like, so similarly, like, you know, Marxists love to get a hammer and sickle out. You know, they love to have the red flag, and this. I feel like they can't. Probably the same thing is true of Marxists. Like, you can't really be a quiet Marxist. Like, you're gonna give it away at some point.
And why do you think that is? Is it simply because you're making some aesthetic point, some aesthetic relation to the political, some way of like some aesthetic notion of how we experience the political realm?
Well, my first thought is that it's not the idea that you have the political beliefs and then they have an aesthetic manifestation, which is how I think we generally think about this, is false, right? In the sense, like, I think
Mm.
the aesthetic manifestation is like co-primary with the belief. So,
Mm.
and it may even be the other way around. Like, I always remember this awful conversation that I overheard with a young Trotskyist who was talking about whether or not he was going to get like a hammer and sickle tattoo, right?
Mm.
And he was just really, like, you know, it was really kind of agonizing about it. I take it that this idea of symbolizing his Marxism, it was almost like the telos of what he was doing. Like, it wasn't. I mean, it's an identity, right? Being a Marxist, being a Trotskyist, being a communist, and the signaling to other people about your ideology is a large part of the point of any ideology. Like, I'm not singling out communism, but I kind of do want to single out communism, because in the case of communism or Marxism, it's completely paradoxical. Like, they really shouldn't be doing that, and the fact they are kind of gives the lie to their belief system.
And that's a common narrative, isn't it? That those I was reading about Picasso the other day, and when he joined the Communist Party, I can't remember when. Must have been maybe the 30s or 40s. But and I think this is a fairly common story, which is to say you join the Communist Party and you finally feel as if you belong to something for the first time in your life. And that's usually from, you know, people who are sort of oriented towards the left, but probably atheist, and then they suddenly feel a sense of belonging which they've never felt before. I mean, this is, or am I generalizing here? But this is quite a common.
I think this is
report.
absolutely right. There's a conversion experience. And Foucault talks about this somewhere.
Yeah.
That people on the left, you know, that left-wing movements, you know, they're very similar to religious movements, and they perform a lot of the same function.
Mm.
The problem with it, to my mind, is it's hypocritical when they do it. Like, as with the cult of personality, it's hypocritical for Marxism to be a spirituality, because it says that it attacks religion, and then it is one. You know, I mean, this is very much where I've come in my thinking in recent times. But, like, the only thing that does this in a non-hypocritical way is religion itself, because religion actually says it is doing what it's doing. Like, it doesn't.
It is a matter of faith by definition.
Yeah, and it says, and it allows, like, it allows. Oh, look, we need to have a community oriented around a belief system, and it needs to perform the function of giving people a sense of meaning in their life.
Mm-hmm. What are the Marxists going to say in reply though? I mean, someone like, I don't know, someone like Badiou, who what's he? He's I mean, he's going to say that something like communism is a kind of commitment to, at least, I mean, one amongst other things, but a sort of a commitment to love, and also for various complicated mathematical reasons, he's an atheist because there is no, correct me if I'm wrong here, Mark, but there is sort of no ultimate set of sets. So there can't be one unifying thing. So there can be no God.
L'un n'est pas.
That's right. So what are they going to say back to you? Because I mean, this is not a new critique of Marxism or any other religious movement for that matter. So what's the response?
I mean, look, there's a catastrophic risk of the wrong people hearing this, in the sense of, like, there's 3 people in the world who'll be offended by what I might say about Badiou here, but they're people who, are fortunately unlikely to listen to this podcast. The bottom line with Badiou is that Badiou's position, most people would regard it as basically an unsustainable via media, I want to say, like middle position between religion and Marxism, right? Because Badiou is not a Marxist, or doesn't identify as such. And what he does really is he has a kind of, I want to say, spiritualized. I mean, that's obviously not quite how he thinks of it, but a communism of the spirit, which sits somewhere in between the pure religiosity of a religion and the materialism of Marxism. Because it's anti-materialist, his communism, right? So he's broken with Marxism in a, I would overtly say, Christian direction. Like, and you get this, like, when you read his book on St. Paul, which I know you have, James, and I think at my instigation read it.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book, actually. That was the first Badiou book I've read.
Yeah. Well, it was, and certainly not, like, for me, the other way around. Like, I've read a lot of Badiou. Not, I mean, of course, again, there's people who will be listening to this maybe who have read a lot more than me, but they're in a very small set of people who have. Like, I've read really quite a lot of Badiou, more than he's probably in the, out of the people I've read the most of, probably in the top 5 of reading their work. I've read a lot of Badiou, mostly the political stuff, because that was what the real point of interest was. Badiou's differences with St. Paul are so minuscule, right? But they come down to something very vital, which is there's an event which Badiou believes, that Paul is adhering to, which mean that Badiou is not a Christian. So he disagrees, and he disagrees about the event of Christ. Basically, he says that there's an event here, but he does this in a way that I find very unsatisfactory, which is he claims that the event of Christ is the resurrection. I mean, with good. It's a good basis for this, based on what Paul says. The resurrection, like, you believe if the resurrection hasn't happened, your faith's in vain, right? So, he bases this in the text of Romans, and says, well, I don't believe in that, therefore, I'm not a Christian. And the I think there's a dual problem with this, which is that, firstly, there's an inadequate reason. There's no reason. He doesn't give any reason for not believing in that event. And secondly, I don't think that's the event of Christ that it's necessary to believe in either, from a Badiousian perspective.
So what is the event in your perspective?
Well, I think I've probably said this to you before, but I'm tempted to say with Christ that the appropriate event would be the Sermon on the Mount, like, because that's a truth event where Christ lays out a kind of ideological agenda. So,
like a radical othering.
Yeah, which Badiou seems to be basically on board with. Like, Badiou seems to be on board with the message of Christianity, but not with the metaphysical kind of idea that, I mean, obviously, and God. I mean, look, so I mean, that's not a trivial problem that Badiou believes, for essentially, for set theoretic reasons, for mathematical reasons, that there is no possibility of a monotheistic deity. Which is, I mean, again, I feel like, people may take umbrage at this, but I think Badiou's mathematical arguments have very little purchase for the great majority of people. Like, the idea that set theory can't mathematize God doesn't, I think, constitute like a particularly good argument.
I guess the counter argument would be it does for Badiou, because maths is ontology, right? It is being, and so that must, in his framework, that must also constitute God, or in this case, not God. But of course, if you actually do have a faith in God, if you do believe in God, then surely God would sort of rise above that, or would not be constituted within that kind of ontology. Is that right?
I have a particular problem here, which is like by this point in the discussion, I mean, I've been kind of alluding to this up to this point, but at this point, like I can really, anything I say, I can hear Justin Clements, like, or like I can anticipate like what
Right.
Justin might say. I mean, not that I would flatter myself to think that he would ever listen to this podcast. So I assume he simply won't have the time or inclination to do so. But I feel like anything I can say will just walk into obvious objections from someone who really knows Badgie back to front, the way someone like Justin does. But nonetheless, I'll walk into the trap. I mean, I think that one problem with Badgie's stance on mathematics, which he's willing to own up to, is the problem that mathematics or set theory is not kind of totally settled fact, right? So, like, in Being an Event, his kind of original magnum opus, he relies on Cantorian set theory. But then in his Logic of Worlds, Being an Event 2, the sequel book that he put out 15 years ago or something, bit less than that, he kind of glams onto, because Cantorian set theory now is pretty old, like it's not really the cutting edge, so he glams onto newer theories in mathematics. And because the theories in mathematics will change, right, he has to update his ontology. Now, that's a weird position to be in, so for starters. So although that on his account mathematics gives us fundamental ontology, that means ontology is just beholden to mathematics, which itself develops over time. So so therefore, like, if mathematics tells you God doesn't exist now, that doesn't really seem like a particularly knockdown argument, because mathematics itself is malleable. But there's also I think a bigger problem here, which is just that the very claim that mathematics is ontology is axiomatic. I think it's like mathematics itself, right? You just kind of it's a matter of pure faith, which at that point just contests with the faith one has in the existence of God. Like, it's like, well, I can have faith in mathematics, or I can have faith in God. And I think that I don't think Badiou is trying to conceal that fact. Like, I think for Badiou, it does come back down to faith, which is a way in which he's profoundly similar to Christianity, although his faith is not in the same things that Christians' faith is in. So Badiou believes what he believes, and he doesn't think, so from the point of view of talking about St. Paul, like, well, he just doesn't believe in the same event.
Yeah,
that's just why he doesn't give reasons for it. Like, it's not that there's like a rational argument, it's just that his fidelity is not there.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I found most striking about the Paul book, is that, I mean, I've never been closer to becoming a Christian than reading that book, which I don't think was his intention. But there is this kind of really weird bit where he says the resurrection is this event. Paul is the only one to see this, but the resurrection didn't happen, so we don't have to worry about it. And you think, well, okay, but this also just seems like an extraordinary thing to say. I mean, I feel like there should have been a chapter devoted to this.
I mean, it's like Badgie's not saying anything about it, because Badgie's just saying kind of what everyone thinks now.
Yeah.
It's difficult because Badgie generally doesn't say what everyone thinks. So I take it everyone today generally believes I mean, everyone, not me, but like, and not a pretty sizable chunk of people, actually, because when you get into like religious belief, a lot of people don't really adhere to this. But the general kind of light culture these days is this kind of scientific materialism that says, oh, things obey like a series of scientific laws and so on. And that determines reality. And consequently, the resurrection of Christ from the dead doesn't happen because that's against the law.
Because it can't happen. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just not factual. That's not. And there's, I mean, look, to be fair, like, if we're going to be empiricists, like, there's not, but I think, I just think empiricism is, as I said, like, I think, there's no, because this where's the evidence of empiricism? Empiricism is just leads you down an eternal regress. And I know you've gone quite a long way with empiricism in the past, James, but there's no evidence-based argument for the reliability of evidence. It's again completely axiomatic and faith-based, and I just don't think it's going to get you anywhere. Like, so sure, like, we're not going to get like scientific evidence. I mean, there of course there are like Christians who will try and push that there is somehow an evidence-based argument for the resurrection, but like, I don't think you're going to get it. But I don't think it.
Yeah,
that's not what it's about at all. Like,
I mean, from my perspective, cards on the table, I'm still basically a Kantian idealist. Like, that's really my position. Like, which is clearly
Cringe and blue pill.
cursed and yeah, that's right. Cringe and blue pill. That's right. But I still, to me, it just seems right. Like but the victory of empiricism, or I mean, more specifically, sort of the positivism of the early, sort of the first half of the 20th century, which has just permeated into kind of general culture now. The victory of those kinds of positivisms is the fact that we now discuss, and you see this in, the new atheism, all this kind of stuff. The victory of that is that we now talk about religion purely in terms of its explanatory function. That is to say, how, the reason why religion is false is because it cannot explain empirical phenomena, which is, it's not the point. Like, the idea that the absurdity of, for example, believing the world was created however many thousand years ago. I think, was it 6,000 years ago, 7,000 years ago, whatever it is, because there are fossils, and this is meant to just end Christ, which is just, it just seems like this is not what religion is for.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a certain reliance by the new atheists on a kind of converse fundamentalism. So obviously there are, there is this non-trivial kind of Christian fundamentalist movement that does take the Bible literally and therefore wants to say the world is and we'll still, there's this argument back and forth between the, fedoras and the brainlets around these questions. But yeah, certainly seems to me to be missing the point.
That's the victory, I think, of the permeation of empiricism, even if we don't necessarily subscribe ourselves to that position.
I mean, that's another thing. Christian fundamentalism isn't empiricist, so I'll give it its due. Because at least whatever they may be, at least they may be very literal minded people. It's funny for me even to contemplate, because ultimately the reality of fundamentalism is it's literal. They're literal like half the time, but there's certainly, there's no fundamentalist who can interpret everything in the Bible literally.
No.
And that's, if they did, it would be nonsensical. So, I think, interpreting the Bible literally is a ridiculous game to go down. I guess you can say the converse though, which is if you interpret everything in the Bible non-literally, then you also end up in some kind of serious problem as well. So the balance is hard to strike. But yeah, they're not empiricists.
I don't think I meant that. I think it's more the fact that when we talk about religion and whether or not it's true, it's always along the term in the terms of whether or not it can explain certain physical phenomena. But no one, for example, it's much less common now to think about, for example, what Badiou talks about, which is the kind of ethical ideas of Christianity, which is, for example, the radical forgiveness of Christ, these kinds of things, which is to me the most interesting. Jesus as radical figure, Paul as the one who recognizes the resurrection as this fundamental moment, this new event, which sort of others human life forever. That to me is the most interesting thing, rather than the stuff that Richard Dawkins is worried about. The stuff that Richard Dawkins is worried about, which to me is just banal.
No, that's totally what I mean. Of course, Ian Dawkins is a scientist somehow.
Yep.
I mean, Dawkins had this incredibly stupid tweet last night, like 24 hours ago, which came to my attention on my Twitter feed. He's a quite extraordinarily stupid man.
Yeah, it's yeah.
But I link this up. I mean, I'd link this up to his anti-Christianity, because he's someone who's totally without humility. He has no intellectual humility, and that, of course, he'll despise Christianity.
What was the tweet?
Jamie, can you get this up for us?
Yeah.
I actually RT'd this from the Metacritic Twitter account, so it's very easy for me to find, with a comment. And as usual, nobody touched it. His tweet is, in quote marks, existentialist child, logical positivist child, Neoplatonist child, Marxist Keynesian monetarist child, close quotes. We don't assume child inherits parents' philosophy. So why label, all caps, label isn't all caps, label, in quotes, Catholic child, in quotes, Muslim child, etc. Why are there segregated faith schools for, in quotes, Catholic children, etc.? And I just thought this was so monstrously stupid. Like, there's so many stupidities in this tweet. Anyway, my RT of this, my quote tweet of it, said, "This is what Oxford does to your mind. Many such cases, sad."
I mean, where's the lie?
Yeah, well,
that's classic Oxbridge.
Well, yeah, I think Oxford more than Cambridge, although I've had limited amounts to do with people from Cambridge. But I think, I've encountered a lot of people from, and I'm sure there's many exceptions. There's people, there's very lovely and wonderful people I've known who've been to Oxford. Wonderful people. So I don't believe that. So when I say this is what Oxford does to your mind, I probably, in fact, now thinking about some of the people who may have read that tweet, probably should have used like this is what Oxford can do to your mind or something like that. But I've definitely, it's something that you see a lot in like the mainly non-academic ruling class in England, like the kind of people who write newspaper articles, particularly the columnists. And is that angle grinder coming through? Like it's loud here. Yeah, news and politicians, which is these are people who spent 3 years at Oxford doing whatever. Great. They reading like, I mean, probably more like these days modern literature. They read like, I don't know what, Virginia Woolf at Oxford. They spend 3 years at Oxford and believe they know everything when their education is so thin, like risably thin.
But it's that classic English thing of taking ignorance as a first principles form of rigor. You see it all the time.
Yeah, I think we're thinking about a mutual acquaintance when you say that. I mean, certainly I am, who also coincidentally went to Oxford. I can't read your face here.
I'm saying nothing.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, look, that tweet. I'm going to dissect it for the sake of it, but I'll spell it out. Firstly, the reason people don't talk about Neoplatonist children as a category of children, or existentialist children, first, there's no durable community around any of these categories. Like, it's just total nonsense.
I'm going to put it out there and say there are no Neoplatonist parents alive today. That's what I'm going to say. I'm claiming.
I'm sure there are individuals in it, but the bottom line is there's no possibility. So he's chosen a whole series of like intellectual movements. I mean,
did he also say logical Did he say logical positivism as well?
Yeah, he says logical positivism.
There are certainly no logical positivist parents. Like that is bonkers.
Because most of them are like dead movements. I mean, the one, and the Keynesian one is so ludicrous because Keynesianism is not. So like some of these, because existentialism like makes a little bit of sense because existentialism is kind of a total worldview. Like I can see how being an existentialist can be something like having a religion, but it isn't really because it's really the absence of that. Like existentialism is. I mean, although not formally nihilist, it's much too nihilist to be a positive worldview. Logical positivism, similarly. Neoplatonism is really like a broad family of beliefs that potentially would include several religious things. So it's not.
I was going to say, surely that includes a lot of Christianity.
Yeah. So how is the Catholic child not a Neoplatonist child? Anyway, the one actually in that list that is kind of interesting is the Marxist child because, actually that kind of is a thing. Like red diaper babies. Like I have known people who were, cradle Marxists whose parents were both Marxists who grew up in Marxist organizations. And okay, it's true, people didn't talk about them being a quote Marxist child, but they certainly went to the summer camps. So do they have segregated faith schools for Marxists? Not in the formal sense of having like schools because it would be against Marxist ideology essentially to send all the Marxist kids to special Marxist schools. But you certainly do have Marxist educational, organizations for children. So that's kind of a bad example. But I mean, the reason that you label children of religious denominations, members of that denomination, is because the children are formally members. Like if you're a Catholic child, you are baptized into Catholicism, right after birth, you are formally a member. Like it's not, there's a membership structure and you're a member. So there's no, which you're not if you're an existentialist. Like that, it's powerfully dissimilar. The stupidity of this, which is to say, oh look, this tweet is so fucking illogical. Like, you legitimately have to be a moron to come up with this. And I'm sorry, I honestly think on the basis of this and everything else I know about Dawkins, like the guy's like just a stratospheric Dunning-Kruger case.
Yeah. He's a twit, to use the technical term.
Yeah. But I mean, it's also, we could allow, I don't really feel like allowing this, but we could allow he's a good biologist. But one of the problem here is the guy's just totally out of his area. And this just goes back to what you were talking about. Like people who want to apply like a model of empiricism from the physical sciences onto questions about existence and meaning of philosophy or something like that, which is just a totally invalid importation of that model.
I was thinking about this the other day because you see this. I was talking to some parents the other day who apparently it's a thing now. I don't know if you know this. It's a thing now where you debate at length about whether you're going to imbue your child with the mythology of Father Christmas or Santa Claus. because the logic being that I don't want to lie to my child. So these parents were telling me that they have friends who have told their kids that no, Santa doesn't come to our house because they don't actually want to lie to their children. Which to me is probably one of the most insane things I think about for two reasons. One, because like this was settled in the 1970s when Bruno Bettelheim wrote The Uses of Enchantment. You know, there's strong psychoanalytical reasons why kids need to be exposed to fairy tales. Like there's the key developmental reasons for this. But also, telling stories about Father Christmas, it's not lies. It's not a deception.
I have a lot of thoughts about this, which I don't have a particular view. I mean, unfortunately, like part of me wants to just agree with you and go like, oh, look, this is just, it's just stupid to be concerned about this. But actually, I think there's a genuine problem here. And one reason I believe there's a genuine problem here is that contrary to, I mean, I'm not sure if I've read that Bettelheim piece or not, but in any case, I don't immediately recall the details. But
it's dangerously based, is what I'll say.
Well, whomst among us? The problem with this is that historical enchantment is not supposed to work the way the Father Christmas myth works, right? I've been telling, I mean, like, this is the first Christmas my daughter could understand that Father Christmas was a thing. And I spent a lot of effort replicating what my parents did and convincing her that it was real, which really didn't require very much, because actually at that age, the difference between reality and fiction is not. I mean, I think actually, to be honest, she just doesn't really buy it or see what the point is. But anyway, she's playing along. But look, here's the thing. Here's the deal.
Yeah.
Whenever
you say here's the thing, we know something either completely. It's there's no way to. It's binary. It's either very, very good or absolutely cooked. So let's hear it.
Or both. New thing, just
the dialectic.
Okay. So historically, people believed there were fairies at the bottom of the garden, but it wasn't just a myth they told to children to enchant them. They believed it was a genuine folk belief, right?
Yeah.
And the Father Christmas myth, as it exists today, I think there's a genuine, unprecedented structure to this, which is the idea that no adult believes it, that all children are supposed to believe it. There's not particularly clear, it's not entirely clear where the dividing line here is, but this idea of a conspiracy by all adults to convince children of a falsehood that they know is false. And that is totally new, because historically what you had is in mythologies, folklore, whatever, that were widely believed and were told earnestly to children. And the structure of the Father Christmas myth is weird because it invites this inevitable moment of discovery that it's false and that you've been tricked. And the idea that you're not being tricked, I mean, this is essentially what I'm intending sotto voce to do with our daughter, which is to keep talking about it, but at the point, if she ever actually puts it on the line and goes, look, is this real? I'll have to say no. And there's a really significant, influence here by, there's a Christian discourse around this, because, Christians, I think, rightly are concerned about the fact that you tell your children that God exists, you tell your children that Father Christmas exists. What does that do to their belief in God when they discover that they were lied to about Father Christmas, who is a very godlike figure, like omniscient, extraordinary, power, and of course organically linked to Christianity, like historically based in a saint, relate to Christmas and so on.
That's very interesting. I think on the surface of it, I agree with you, but the problem is not that the children eventually become disenchanted; it's that the adults should believe in Father Christmas.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's 100.
Like that's and also, I mean, Bruno Bettelheim's going to agree with you here, because he says, the moment of disenchantment is vital. And so when you're reading your kids fairy tales, and, especially scary ones, because his point is that you need scary fairy tales because kids need to be sort of exposed to these kinds of these traumas in safe ways. So when the kid says, holy fuck, are the giants or is the wolf or whoever, these kinds of archetypes of the fairy tale, are they going to come get me? And you say, no, they don't live. And he says the key here is you must never say they don't exist, because then the spell is broken and it's all fucked. But you have to say, no, they don't live here. They live very far away. They can't get you here. Except, you need to sort of hold the story at a distance. So I think the solution to Father Christmas is to say, no, he just stops coming at a certain age. but he's real.
No, I think that's. I think that's right. And I mean, the other point, I feel like the point about the childhood trauma, I feel like this is taken care of for me by the fact that there really are brown snakes just beyond our fence, and I have to say
That's right.
that they're like
But
meters away.
that's
But
why
they
you need
can't
the
get
fairy
them.
tales, because you need to teach the children that the world is full of terrors
No,
and traumas.
sure. You know, I'm a little bit unsure about this as a parent because my daughter is so scared of so many things now. She's got this very fearful age where she's scared about
Yeah.
things that are really not scary. So I'm a little bit unsure, although I exactly how to approach this. But no, I think I think this is the logical way out of this with Father Christmas, which is to say that he is actually real, and just to
Yeah.
take the red pill on Father Christmas.
Take the claws pill.
Yeah, the red and white pill, and well, that's that. That's that. But here's the problem. He doesn't exist, and that is I don't know where we go with that.
Fuck you.
Yeah, maybe I'm an empiricist after all. Like, well, it's difficult, but he's actually Father Christmas is the classic fucking.
You talk a big game, Kelly, but when push comes to shove,
But is Father Christmas is a perfect counterexample of this because an empiricist would believe he does exist. Like the empirical, I mean, okay, I mean, maybe not if you're a logical positivist and you demand standards of proof which actually nothing can reach, and therefore you won't actually believe in anything. But like, I mean, there's a meme going around recently about conspiracy theories and Father Christmas saying that like it's believing that Father Christmas doesn't exist is a massive conspiracy theory. It ticks all the boxes of a crazy conspiracy theory.
yeah, I sent it to
Because
you.
yeah, okay.
The mental gymnastics required to not believe in Santa.
No, because there's so much more evidence that he does exist than he does. Like it's Occam's razor demands you just go, yeah, sure, he exists.
Yes.
There is a difficulty with this though, actually, which is the difficulty of squaring it with a whole bunch of other things. Because like the basic story of Father Christmas, like delivering presents to all the children in the world one night, does contradict like basic physical laws. So Salve Veritate, you'd have to like either reject physics or Father Christmas, and I take it that most like cringe scientists out there like want to have their
Yeah, he's fucking magic,
constants.
Man. Like he doesn't have to worry about that shit.
Yeah.
But I romanticize Father Christmas, but I don't know if you had this experience, Mark, but the years in which I can't remember when I stopped believing in Father Christmas, I mean, obviously I've gone back, of course, but when the initial, realization that he may not be real, I'm not sure when that was, but the years in which I did believe in him were terrifying. Like absolutely terrifying, because you would go to bed with the full belief that a very big man with 12 reindeer was going to land on your house, come down the chimney and give you presents. And, this was during a period when I had to get up to go to the bathroom quite a lot. So the great terror was that I would go to the bathroom and catch Father Christmas at it. I catch him in my house, and this would be sort of, a terrible event, because he'd be furious that I was out and about. And so I would lay in bed, like desperately needing to piss, just rigid with fear. So it was highly traumatic.
Yeah.
But I stand by it. I think it was an important part of my development.
No, I had the same similar thing. The only time I had like really serious insomnia as a kid was Christmas Eve, and absolute like consistently, like I would have really unable to sleep. Although it's more about excitement than fear. I don't think I had that.
It was both for me.
It's kind of like. What do you think it's going to do to you? I mean, come on. He's like the nicest guy in the world.
For me, he was always slightly sterner in my family mythology. Like he was happy, but he was also quite stern. And if you got caught out,
did you ever get like a lump of coal?
No, but there were threats. I had a grade 3 teacher who was quite righteous, and she told me that Santa Claus is an American invention. It's actually Saint Nicholas, and he lives in Germany.
Right, because she was of German extraction, one assumes.
I don't even know if she was. I think she was just. I don't know what the issue was. I think she was just fervently anti-American. But this was huge for me. But I think there's something in her. It's something in it.
I mean, something we didn't mention, which was I think would be very obvious to people listening to this discussion, is that we consistently use the English phrase "Father Christmas" to describe this individual, which it was quite natural for me, but slightly surprising to hear from you. And I mean, there's relatedly a surprising thing that's happened in my house over this Christmas period or over Advent, which is that my wife has taken to referring to him always as Father Christmas. And I think it's partly has to do with the fact that my daughter is avidly consuming British TV shows which describe him generally as Father Christmas. yeah, I'm not a big fan of the Santa Claus phrase, which is, this weird bastardized Dutch Americanism. So I'm kind of happy with that. But I mean, actually, to be really blunt, like one of my biggest concerns about raising a child in Australia is that instead of Father Christmas, they would say, as my older child does, Santa, and that's too much for me.
No, I agree. I mean, it was always Father Christmas at my house, despite being Australian.
Right.
And Santa was associated with the most cringe and sickening American.
Is that
sort
like
of
a
imperialism.
Vic, is that a Vic thing? Because I've never encountered.
Nah. I think it's just my lefty parents.
Okay, yeah, right. Good on.
So I'm like I feel physically ill at
same
the name of Santa.
Good on you. Based and Anglo-pilled. Okay. Merry Christmas, everyone.
All right, Mark. Keep warm.
The reason I didn't get you anything this year is because
I don't believe in Santa Claus. His corporate image falls apart. The blinded spending masses to enslave the lower classes. It's obligatory gifts that serve to cleanse the year of guilt and shame. Token gesture justifies the apathetic, hypnotized, leaving them to be Kris Kringle slaves. Ooh! Bye! I won't do it! The season's obligation was not my participation. Bye! I won't do it! The money hungry meeting called corporate swine. Cause it's only for the money, and it's only for the money, cause it's only for the money. Now bye! He monitors naughty and nice. Big brother is Saint Nick. Methodically, his judgment made, documented on his list. I don't believe in Santa Claus or his mystical facade. To teach the children wanted greed, their lust for gifts becomes a need. But brainwashed by the marketing and victims of the corporate scheme, material possessions becoming their obsession. Still, human life has lost its value. Blinding do just what they tell you. I don't believe tactics of intimidation oppress the minds of youth. Using fear for generations, his image hides the truth. He's just a puppet for the system of glutton in a suit, with Yuletide propaganda and a bearded master boot.
That and I couldn't find a place to park at the mall. Sorry.